My younger son, who's a pilot, gave me a call. Mom, something strange is going on. My sister-in-law is at the house. Yes, she is, I answered without a second thought. She's upstairs in the shower. His tone suddenly dropped to a whisper. That can't be right. I'm holding her passport in my hand and I just saw her board my flight to France. Right then I heard footsteps behind me. A soft voice called out, I'm glad you're home. If you're listening to this, please like the video, subscribe and drop a comment about where you're tuning in from. I'd love to know how far my revenge story has traveled. That morning started like any other. After breakfast I hurried to clean up the dishes. My oldest son Michael had left early for work, and the house felt unusually quiet. My grandson Ethan, that mischievous little 7-year-old, was already on the school bus. And my daughter-in-law Samantha, Michael's wife, had just gone upstairs. Her gentle voice floated down to me. Mom, I'm going to take a quick shower. All right, honey, I answered with a smile. I had just set the last plate away when the landline rang. Wiping my hands on my apron, I picked up. On the other end was the cheerful voice of my younger son, Daniel. Hey Mom, just calling to say hi. I've got a little downtime during my layover. Hearing him was like being wrapped in a warm hug. Daniel has always been my pride, chasing his dream of the skies as a co-pilot. We chatted for a bit about his flights and he sounded happy. Then suddenly his tone shifted. Mom, something really odd happened. My sister-in-law is at the house. I frowned, glancing at the stairs where I still heard the water running. Of course she is, sweetie. Samantha's taking a shower right now. I was so certain. She just told me less than 10 minutes earlier, still wearing that white blouse she always lounged around in. But Daniel stayed quiet for a long moment, long enough that I could hear his breathing. Then he spoke again, more serious than I'd ever heard him. That's impossible, Mom. I'm holding her passport right now. I watched her walk onto my flight. She's sitting in first class, and she's with some man. They're sitting close, talking like a couple. His words hit me like a knife. I froze, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. It couldn't be. I had just seen Samantha right here in this house. But upstairs the shower suddenly turned off. A door creaked open and I heard her call down, Mom, who's on the phone? My heart jumped so violently I thought it might burst. Just a friend, I stammered, forcing calm. I stepped quickly into the living room, avoiding her eyes as she peeked from the stairs, her hair dripping wet. Into the phone I whispered, Daniel, I swear I just saw her. He's here. She finished showering. On the other side his voice turned sharp. Mom, I'm staring at her right now on this plane. She's sitting not 20 feet away. I couldn't breathe. My mind went blank. I hung up, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the receiver. The bright, sunny living room felt suffocating. I sank into the couch, chest tight, thoughts spinning wildly. If Samantha was here, then who was the woman Daniel saw on the flight? And if the woman on the plane was really her, who had I just spoken to? A few minutes later, Samantha came into the kitchen wearing a light blue dress, her hair still damp, her smile as sweet as always. Mom, I'm heading to the market early. Want me to grab some vegetables? Her voice was so kind, so normal, it almost made me doubt myself. Yes, dear. Pick up some tomatoes, I said, my throat dry. She nodded, grabbed her wicker basket and walked out the door. I stood there watching her leave, my soul in turmoil. Daniel would never lie, he had no reason to. But I couldn't deny what I'd just seen and heard. The woman I'd lived with for years, unmistakably Samantha, had been right in front of me. Could I really have missed something so big? Was there some secret in my own home I had never noticed? The midday sun filtered through the curtains, stripes of light falling across the tiled floor as I sat in silence. Even the old armchair where I usually read to Ethan seemed heavier, burdened by questions. Daniel's words echoed in my mind, each one hitting harder than the last. I looked up at the wall of family photos. Michael and Samantha on their wedding day, baby Ethan swaddled in blankets, Daniel beaming in his pilot's uniform. Once those memories had brought me comfort. Now they seemed blurred, clouded with doubt. My name is Linda Walker, a 65-year-old widow living in a quiet neighborhood in Austin, Texas. My husband, Charles, passed away 10 years ago, leaving me with 2 sons I love more than my own life. My oldest son, Michael, is an architect, always buried in his drawings and projects. My youngest, Daniel, made me proud by chasing his dream and becoming a pilot. My days revolve around Michael's small family, My daughter-in-law Samantha, my grandson Ethan, and the quiet rhythm of this house. Samantha in my eyes had always been the perfect daughter-in-law. She was beautiful, hardworking, and carried herself with grace. From the way she dressed to how she cared for Ethan, she always seemed impeccable. I still remember their wedding, a big backyard party at her parents' place. Her family didn't have much money, but they poured their hearts into making it perfect. Samantha walked into my life that day with a confident smile and a bright spark in her eyes, like she had been born to be a devoted wife and mother. I often thought about how blessed I was to have her. But after she left for the market that morning, I found myself sitting at the table, clutching the edge of the tablecloth without realizing it. Daniel's call had shaken me, making me rethink little things that once seemed harmless. There were times when Samantha would leave, saying she was going to a friend's or the store, but she'd come back acting different. Some days she was pure sweetness, hugging Ethan tightly and singing him to sleep. Other days she snapped at me over the smallest things, like forgetting to put the salt shaker back in place. I always brushed it off as a young woman's mood swings. But now I wasn't so sure. One memory kept surfacing. A few months ago I saw Samantha write the grocery list with her right hand, her writing neat and steady. The next day she used her left hand and the letters looked crooked like she wasn't used to it. "Since when do you write with your other hand, sweetheart?" I had asked. She laughed lightly and said, "Oh, just practicing for fun, Mom." Back then I didn't think twice. Now that detail cut into me like glass. I was lost in thought when the front door opened and Ethan came running in, his backpack bouncing. He threw his arms around me, chirping, "Grandma, my teacher said I drew so well today." I stroked his hair and tried to smile, though my chest still felt heavy. He pulled out his notebook to show me. "Look, Grandma. Yesterday Mom helped me with her right hand. See how neat it looks. But today she wrote with her left and it's messy, eh?" He pointed to 2 pages. One neat, one sloppy. My heart sank. "Your mom was probably just tired today, honey," I said, masking my unease. But Ethan looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Grandma, Mom is weird. Some days she hugs me a lot and other days she doesn't even look at me." His words pierced me deeper than anything. I hugged him tight, but inside my mind spun into knots. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find my neighbor, Mrs. Harris, holding a plate Samantha had returned to her the day before. She smiled kindly, though her eyes were curious. "Linda, your daughter-in-law is such a sweetheart." But I noticed something. She handed me the plate with her left hand, and I thought you once told me she's right-handed? Maybe she just uses both. I forced a smile. "Maybe so, Helen. Come in for some tea." We chatted casually, but her comment stuck like a thorn. Even the neighbors were noticing. Later that afternoon I stepped into the garden with my watering can, letting the water spill gently over the daisies I'd cared for so many years. The sun was sinking, shadows stretching across the yard, but peace wouldn't come. The voices circled in my mind. Ethan's innocent words, Mrs. Harris's observation, and Daniel's steady voice insisting Samantha was on that plane. When Samantha returned from the market, her wicker basket swung from her left hand. My stomach dropped. She'd always been right-handed, cutting vegetables, brushing Ethan's hair. Yet now she placed the basket on the counter so casually with her left. I forced my voice to sound normal. "What did you pick up, Samantha?" She smiled warmly. "Tomatoes, cilantro, and some fresh fish. I thought I'd make that roasted fish you love tonight. Sound good?" Her tone was sweet as always, but I couldn't take my eyes off her hands. "Left? Right?" I nodded, pretending to tidy the table, though my heart was pounding. Were these details just in my imagination, or were they signs of something much darker? That evening we gathered around the dinner table. Michael was tired but cheerful, asking Ethan about school. Samantha ate slowly with grace and reminded Michael, "Honey, don't forget the parent-teacher meeting next week. Take the day off, all right?" I studied her face, searching for the woman I had once admired so deeply. But in my head, Daniel's words replayed over and over. "She's sitting in first class next to a man." I bit my lip, trying to swallow the weight in my chest. Just 3 nights later the cracks widened. During dinner, Ethan spilled a glass of water across the tablecloth. I grabbed a rag and chuckled gently, "It's okay, honey. Just be careful." But across the table Samantha's expression hardened. "Ethan, why are you always so clumsy? You need to be more careful." Her voice was sharp. I froze, my eyes darting to Michael. He frowned and said quietly, Sam, it was just an accident. Her eyes flashed. You always defend him and I'm left looking like the bad guy in this house. The air at the table grew heavy. Ethan lowered his head, tears welling up, and I wrapped him in my arms. Only days earlier she'd been gentle, reminding Michael about school. Now she felt like an entirely different person. I sat beside her, watching quietly, trying to connect the dots in my mind. One day she was gentle, the next day irritable. Sometimes she wrote with her right hand, sometimes her left. These little differences stacked up like puzzle pieces, but the picture still refused to form. I kept telling myself to stay calm, but every time I looked at Samantha, she felt less like the daughter-in-law I'd known for years and more like a stranger. A few days later I walked Ethan to school. He held my hand as we went down the same old street, and then he stopped suddenly. "Grandma," he said, his voice heavy, "yesterday Mom helped me with my writing. She was so patient and it looked so pretty. But today she didn't even look at my homework. She told me to do it alone." His clear eyes looked into mine and my heart cracked. "She was busy, sweetheart. Don't be sad," I said, though my voice shook. He nodded, but the disappointment lingered in his face. I hugged him tight, feeling powerless. He was only 7. How could he understand something I couldn't even explain to myself? That night at dinner, Samantha suddenly pulled a notebook from her bag and began writing with her left hand. Michael, serving himself food, chuckled. "Since when do you write with your left? It looks so odd." Samantha froze, forcing a smile. "Just experimenting, honey," she said, slipping the notebook back into her bag. But I caught the flash of panic in her eyes. Michael shook his head and let it go, but I could see he'd noticed too. I gripped my spoon tightly, keeping my face neutral while doubts burned inside me. One morning, I carried an empty spice jar across the street to return it to Mrs. Harris, my neighbor. Samantha had borrowed it a few weeks earlier to make chili. When I knocked, Helen opened the door with her usual warm smile, a rag in hand. "Linda, come in. Let me make you some coffee." I planned to thank her and leave, but she pulled me into her kitchen instead. The room smelled of roasted coffee, but I couldn't relax. Helen lowered her voice. "Please don't be upset with me. Has your daughter-in-law changed? Some days she's so friendly, even asking about my kids. But just yesterday she walked by and when I waved she ignored me completely, as if she didn't know me." Her words dropped into my chest like stones. I forced a smile. She must have been in a hurry. You know how young folks are. But inside I was shaken. Helen wasn't the type to make things up. She noticed details most people overlooked. If even she felt something was off, maybe my suspicions weren't just my imagination anymore. I stayed long enough to sip the now cold coffee, then said goodbye with a heavy heart. On my way home I stopped by Mr. Baker's shop, the one I always visited for Ethan's favorite pastries. "Mrs. Walker," he greeted me cheerfully. "What can I get for the little champ today?" I ordered a few things and then he asked casually, "You're Michael's mom, right? Your daughter-in-law came in the other day, so sweet. Said my bread was the best she'd ever had. But this morning she came back and she was different. Cold, no smile. Didn't even thank me." His words froze me. I forced a shaky reply, "She must have been tired, Joe. Thank you." I hurried out, my purse gripped tightly in my hands. Back home I made tea and sat on the porch. The wind carried the faint scent of daisies from the garden. I looked down the street toward the market path Samantha always took. Soon I saw her returning. "Good afternoon, Mom," she said flatly, no smile, no spark. Just yesterday she'd come home glowing, bragging about the deal she'd gotten on cilantro. Now nothing. I studied her closely. The blouse she wore today was navy blue, not the white one she'd left in. "Why'd you change your blouse?" I asked softly. Samantha paused, then replied. Quickly, "I stained it. Had to change." She gave a half smile and slipped into the kitchen. I sat with the teacup in my hand, my chest tightening like a stone pressing down. That night we all gathered at the table. Ethan spoke excitedly about school, his little voice filling the room, but Samantha only nodded, barely responding. Then Michael asked, "Are you done, buddy, so your mom can clear the plates?" And Ethan, innocent as ever, turned to me. "Grandma, Mom didn't sing me to sleep last night. But yesterday she did. She sang that song Cielito Lindo. The same one you sing. And it sounded so pretty." My heart dropped. Only Samantha and I knew that lullaby inside this house. Why would she sing it one night and not the next? Why was she changing so fast? I cleared the plates, but my thoughts weren't at the table anymore. I remembered the time she'd leave saying she was visiting a friend and come back with that odd look. One time she carried flowers claiming a friend gave them. Another time she snapped angrily when I asked why she was home so late. I used to brush it all aside. Now they felt like parts of a bigger secret. Later, when the kitchen was clean and quiet, I sat at the dining table and pulled out an old notebook. My hands shook as I wrote the first line. 3 p.m. Samantha leaves for the market. Returns 6 p.m. Blue blouse, irritable. I didn't even know why I was doing it, but I couldn't keep pretending nothing was happening. I wrote more. Yesterday she sang Ethan to sleep, tender. Today she was cold, said nothing. Each word carved my suspicions deeper into reality. The notebook that once held recipes now filled with notes about Samantha. About the woman who no longer felt like family. Every line I wrote felt like another brushstroke of doubt, painting a picture I was afraid to see. I sat in the kitchen staring at that notebook, my heart heavy. I couldn't keep these thoughts locked inside anymore. They came in waves, rising, crashing, and leaving me alone in confusion. I needed someone to talk to. Someone who would understand without judging. I thought of Nancy, my best friend since girlhood. We used to sit under trees, knitting and sharing secrets about life. I picked up the phone, my voice trembling. Nancy, are you free this afternoon? Let's meet at the coffee shop on the corner. I really need to talk. He didn't hesitate. Linda, I knew something was wrong. Don't worry, I'll be there. I felt a little relief, though the weight still pressed on me. I pulled on my old shawl and walked to the small cafe where Nancy and I had shared so many joys and sorrows. The place looked the same, dark wooden tables, the rich smell of fresh coffee. I chose a dim corner table so our conversation couldn't be overheard. I wrapped my hands around the hot mug, though inside I felt cold. How was I supposed to tell her that I was doubting my own daughter-in-law? Nancy arrived with a light sweater and a bag of vegetables. She sat down and gave me that sharp yet caring look. Linda, I can see it in your face. Something's wrong. Tell me what's going on. I took a deep breath, forcing the words out. I told her about Daniel's call from the airport, about Samantha's passport, about the woman who looked just like her boarding the plane. Then I explained all the little things I'd noticed. The shifting moods, the way she switched hands when writing. Finally, I pulled the notebook from my bag and slid it across the table. Look, I've written everything down. I don't know if I'm imagining it, but I can't play the fool anymore. Nancy flipped through the pages slowly, her brow furrowed. You've noticed everything, Linda. Each time she goes out and comes back, it's like she's someone else. What do you think it means? I shook my head, gripping my cup. I don't know. I just know I'm scared. Scared that Samantha's hiding something. Scared that if I dig deeper, my family will fall apart. But I can't stop. I need the truth, for Michael, for Ethan. Nancy leaned closer, her tone firm. Linda, you can't fool a woman's instincts. What does your gut say? Because I'm certain something shady is going on. You have to get to the bottom of it. My voice dropped to a whisper. But what if I'm wrong? What if I hurt Michael? He cut me off. Trust yourself. If you don't figure this out, you'll live with the doubt forever. And you won't be able to protect them. Just then Mrs. Carter, who sells vegetables at the market, walked into the cafe. He spotted me and smiled. Mrs. Walker, what a coincidence. Last week I saw your daughter-in-law at the market. She was so kind, even bought extra cilantro to cook with. But this morning she came back all serious, didn't even say hello. Is something wrong with her? I forced a polite smile. She must be tired, Marie. Inside I felt like I was sinking. Another person noticing the same strange shifts. When Mrs. Carter left, Nancy took my hand. See? It's not just you. Even the neighbors notice. Stop lying to yourself. Keep writing it all down. And if you have to, follow her. Not to hurt her, but to protect your family. Her words stung because I knew she was right. But the thought of spying on my own daughter-in-law made me feel like a traitor. I'd spent my whole life caring for this family, and now I had to do something I never imagined. Investigate one of my own. That afternoon, Samantha left the house with her red basket. Mom, I'm going to the market for a bit, she said gently. I nodded, and when she walked out the gate, I wrote in my notebook. 3 p.m. Samantha leaves for the market with red basket. Normal attitude. I sat watching the clock, counting each minute. At 6 o'clock she returned. But now she was carrying a blue basket. Did you switch baskets? I asked. She smiled quickly. Yes, the other one broke. A friend lent me this one. I nodded again, though my hands shook as I added. Returned 6 p.m., blue basket. Voice rushed. The notes kept piling up, each line pulling me closer to the truth and farther from the trusting woman I used to be. That weekend, Michael had overtime and Ethan was busy with a school event. The house was unusually quiet, just me and Samantha. I busied myself cleaning the dining table, trying to chase away the doubts gnawing at me. Then Samantha came downstairs in a pale yellow floral dress, looking as fresh as the day she married. "Mom, I'm heading to the market," she said softly, grabbing her wicker basket. I nodded, smiling, though inside a voice whispered, "Follow her, Linda. Find out the truth." I didn't hesitate. I threw my old shawl over my head to hide my face a little and slipped out after her, keeping a safe distance. The sun was hot, sweat rolled down my back, but I didn't care. I needed answers. Samantha walked quickly down the street that usually led to the market. But then, instead of turning right as always, she turned left into a narrow alley that cut through a rough working-class neighborhood. The houses were crammed together, paint peeling, roofs patched with rusty tin. My heart pounded as I slowed down, hiding behind a row of bicycles leaning against a wall. She didn't look back. I followed as she went deeper, into an alley so narrow the sunlight barely touched it. I ducked behind a mechanic's shop where a man worked on an engine, his wrench clinking against metal. From there I saw her stop at an old wooden door. She knocked lightly, then slipped inside and disappeared. I stood frozen, my breath shallow, my mind spinning. What was my daughter-in-law doing there? That wasn't the market. It wasn't any of the friends' houses she had mentioned. I wanted to march over, knock on that door and demand answers, but my feet felt glued to the ground. I was terrified of the truth, terrified that what I might find would shatter everything. In the end I turned back. Each step toward home felt heavier than the last. But when I pushed open the gate I froze. Samantha was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables in a crisp white blouse, completely different from the floral dress she'd left in. She frowned at me, her eyes sharp and cold. "Where'd you go, Mom? Why are you just getting back?" My mouth went dry. Just minutes earlier, I'd watched her walk into that alley in a yellow dress. How could she already be back and in different clothes? I just went for a walk," I stammered. She nodded, said nothing more, but her gaze cut right through me. I hurried upstairs, pretending to look for something, but really I just needed to get away from that look and calm my pounding heart. That night, while I sat knitting, Ethan ran into my room, cheeks flushed from playing outside. He hugged my legs, sobbing. "Grandma, Mom yelled at me just because I dropped a pencil. Yesterday she was nice, she hugged me. But today she yelled." I pulled him into my arms, stroking his hair, though inside I was burning. "She was tired, honey. Don't be sad," I whispered, my voice shaking. He buried his face into my shoulder and said, "Grandma, I want the mom from yesterday." His words cut into me like a knife. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the same images over and over. Samantha in the yellow dress disappearing into that alley, Samantha in the white blouse waiting in the kitchen, and Daniel's voice, "She's on my flight." I opened my notebook, my hand trembling, and wrote a single sentence. Maybe they are not the same person. Even seeing the words on paper made me shiver. The next morning I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the family photo from the living room, the one of Michael, Samantha, and Ethan smiling together, and headed back to that alley. The narrow street was just as grim as before. I stopped by a corn stand where a middle-aged woman tended her coals. I held out the photo. "Excuse me, have you seen this woman around here?" She studied it and nodded. "Oh yes, she comes and goes from that house there, number 14. My heart jumped into my throat as I walked toward the rundown house. Its walls were stained, the wooden door peeling, a wilted daisy in a pot by the window. My hands shook as I knocked, each rap echoing like a hammer in my chest. The door creaked open and I lost my breath. Standing before me was a woman identical to Samantha. Same face, same long dark hair. The only difference was her trembling hands gripping a rag and her frightened eyes. Samantha," I whispered. The woman flinched, clutching the rag tighter, and tried to shut the door. But then a calm voice called from inside. "Ivy, don't hide anymore. You know this isn't right." Another young woman stepped out from the shadows. She was thin, her hair pulled back in a bun, her expression intelligent but kind. She smiled faintly at me. "I'm Rachel Adams, Ivy's roommate, Mrs. Walker. Please come inside. It's time you knew the truth. I steadied myself, forcing my legs to move. The small home was dim, the tin roof sagging, the air heavy with disinfectant. The concrete floor was cracked, and in the corner, an older man lay coughing weakly on a cot under a frayed blanket. My chest tightened at the sight. Rachel motioned for me to sit on a wooden chair. The woman who looked exactly like Samantha lowered her head. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I'm not Samantha. My name is Ivy. I stared, my mind spinning. The face was the same, but the name was strange. Then explain, I said, my voice sharp with disbelief. Why do you look exactly like my daughter-in-law? Why have you been in my home? Ivy's eyes filled with guilt. She couldn't answer right away. Rachel poured her a glass of water from a plastic jug and spoke instead. Mrs. Walker, Ivy grew up poor. Her foster parents are very sick. The man you see lying there especially. Years ago she met Samantha at a market. They were like twins. Samantha realized it and took advantage. She offered Ivy money to step into her shoes whenever she needed a break. Ivy didn't want to, but the pay was good, enough to cover medicine for her parents. Ivy gripped the rag so hard her knuckles went white. I leaned in. Replace her? For what? Why would Samantha need that? Ivy's voice trembled. I don't know everything, ma'am. She just told me to stay in the house, sometimes take Ethan to school, sometimes shop at the market. He gave me plenty of money. Enough to keep my parents alive. I didn't dare ask questions. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she looked away. Suddenly the puzzle came together. The shifting moods, the handwriting that changed from one day to the next, the tenderness one night and the coldness the next. It all fit. Rachel's voice sharpened. I don't know if this matters, but once I saw Samantha with a very elegant man. His name was William Turner. I overheard it at a coffee shop. They called each other honey. The name sliced through me. I remembered Daniel's voice. She's sitting in first class with a rich man. The room seemed to spin around me, my heart pounding in my ears. I tried to stay calm, but my hands shook so badly that I knocked over the glass of water. Rachel hurried to wipe it up, but I waved her off, my voice breaking. She, Samantha, is deceiving my family. Ivy burst into tears. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to save my parents. I looked at this young woman, her face the mirror image of Samantha's, but her eyes filled with pain and regret. I wanted to be angry, to scream, but all I felt for her was pity. She wasn't the mastermind. She was just a pawn in Samantha's game. My world was falling apart right in front of me. I stood, forcing my voice to sound firm. Ivy, do you know where Samantha goes? Do you know what she's doing when she asks you to take her place? Ivy shook her head, still sobbing. I don't, ma'am. She just gave me instructions, paid me, and I never dared to ask more. Rachel laid a comforting hand on her shoulder, then turned to me. Mrs. Walker, I know this hurts, but Ivy's a victim too. She had no choice. I glanced around the cramped home, the cracked floor, the faint smell of disinfectant, the sick man coughing weakly on a cot in the corner. I understood Ivy's desperation, but it didn't dull the sharp sting of betrayal. Clenching my fists, I blinked back tears. I don't blame you, Ivy. But I need the truth. I have to protect my son and my grandson. I thanked Rachel quietly, then left. The bright sun outside made me squint, but my heart stayed cold. The next morning I found myself back in that alley, the peeling door of number 14 pulling me in like a magnet. I clutched the family photo. Michael, Samantha, and Ethan smiling, like it could give me courage. This time Ivy wasn't so nervous. She opened the door and said softly, Mrs. Walker, I was expecting you. Please come in. Inside, the house was the same, dim, smelling faintly of medicine and sickness. Ivy looked exhausted but calmer now, her hair in a loose bun, her blouse plain. I sat in the wooden chair and took a deep breath. Ivy, I want to meet your adoptive mother. I need to understand all of this. She nodded and led me to a corner where a frail woman lay in bed, her hair pure white, her cloudy eyes staring at the ceiling. Ivy whispered, This is Mrs. Reed, my adoptive mom. I gently took the woman's thin hand. I'm Linda Walker, Michael's mother. Samantha's mother-in-law. Mrs. Reed breathed shallowly, her voice weak. Ivy isn't my blood. I adopted her as a newborn. Her words hit me like a hammer. My heart pounded, but I tried to keep steady. Please, tell me how. She coughed, then spoke slowly. Years ago, I worked as a nurse in a small-town hospital. A poor family came in with newborn twins. They were so poor they said they could only keep one. The mother was crying. They were going to abandon the other. I couldn't let that happen. So I took her home. That was Ivy. She stopped to catch her breath, then looked at her daughter with tender eyes. I raised her as my own. She's always wanted to know who her real parents were. I had nothing to give her but my love, and this house. My head spun as I clutched the edge of the chair. Do you know who her biological parents were? My voice trembled. Mrs. Reed shook her head. Only that they were a poor family from a nearby town. I never asked much. I just wanted to save the child. I turned to Ivy, who sat with her face lowered, tears streaking down her cheeks. Mrs. Walker, I know nothing about my real parents, she said softly. But when I met Samantha, I thought maybe she could tell me. She looks so much like me. But she never said a word. My breath caught. Do you have any records? Papers? I asked. Mrs. Reed pointed toward an old dresser. Ivy pulled out a yellowed envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a copy of her hospital documents. My eyes flew to the date of birth and I froze. It was identical to Samantha's. The same day, the same year. My hands shook as I looked back at Ivy. You and Samantha could be twin sisters, I whispered. Ivy collapsed, covering her face. So she's my sister. Why didn't she tell me? Why did she make me live this lie? My heart shattered. I remembered the day Samantha first entered my home, radiant and confident, the picture of the perfect wife and mother. I had loved her, trusted her, believed she would give Michael happiness. And now I knew the truth. Samantha hadn't just deceived my family, she had also taken advantage of her own sister, using her as a double to cover secrets I couldn't even imagine. I stood, placed my hand gently on Ivy's shoulder, and though my voice was firm, the pain bled through. From today on, I won't let anyone use you anymore. I'll help with your parents' illness, but in return you must cooperate with me. We need to bring this truth to light, for Michael, for Ethan. Ivy nodded through tears. I'll help you. I don't want to live in this lie anymore. In her eyes I saw sincerity, and for the first time, a sliver of hope pierced through the storm. I left her house, walking down the alley, my soul tangled in questions. I passed the bustling market, people laughing, bargaining, living their ordinary lives. But in my mind Mrs. Reed's words rang like church bells. 2 twins. One abandoned. One raised. And somehow their paths had crossed inside my family. Back home my heart felt like scorched earth after a storm. The secret of Samantha and Ivy, the truth about the twins, was a weight pressing me flat. I stood at a crossroads I wasn't ready for. Confront my daughter-in-law or stay silent while the lies destroyed us. That night I picked up the phone and called Daniel. My voice was steady though my hands shook. Son, you need to come home tomorrow night. There are things you must clarify. He sounded alarmed. Mom, is something serious going on? I forced my tone to stay even. Just come, honey. And bring Samantha's electronic passport if you can. He didn't ask another question. His mom. I'll be there. When I hung up, I felt the ground give way beneath me. Tomorrow night would change everything. The next day I rose early and cooked a big dinner. I spread a white tablecloth, lit candles, made Michael's favorite chili and the roasted fish Ethan always begged for. It wasn't a celebration. It was the dividing line between the life we had before and whatever would follow. Every chop of the knife in the kitchen felt like it was slicing through my own heart. By dusk, Michael came home tired from work and paused at the sight of the set table. What are we celebrating, Mom? Why all the food? I smiled faintly. I just wanted us all to sit down together. Go wash up, honey. Samantha entered in her light blue dress, smiling softly, though I saw a flicker of nerves in her eyes. Ethan ran to me squealing, Grandma, the fish smells so good. I stroked his hair, a lump rising in my throat. Deep inside, I knew his innocent little smile might never shine the same again after tonight. We sat. At first, the dinner felt almost normal. Michael spoke about work, Ethan bragged about his drawing from school, Samantha nodded politely. But I noticed her hand trembling as she lifted her spoon. I drew in a breath and gave the signal. Daniel stepped inside, and behind him came Ivy, wearing a plain dress, her face identical to Samantha's but clouded with anguish. The table went silent. Ethan's eyes darted between them. Grandma, he asked in confusion, Why are there two moms? Michael went pale, his spoon clattering onto the table. Samantha jumped up, shouting, "What is this, Mom?" I pushed myself to my feet, gripping the edge of the table to hide my trembling. "Sit down, Samantha," I said firmly. "We're clearing this up right now." And so I told it. About Daniel's call from the airport when he saw her boarding a flight to France. About her switching hands when she wrote. About her moods, warm one day and icy the next. And about that alley, where I met Ivy and discovered the secret. "You and Ivy are twin sisters," I said, staring straight into her eyes. "You used your sister to cover your lies. Tell us the truth." Samantha's face drained of color. "She's lying to humiliate me," she screamed. But Daniel dropped a folder on the table with a hard thud. "This is your electronic passport with stamps showing you were in France. You can't be at home and on a plane at the same time." Samantha looked at the papers, lips pressed tight, speechless. Ethan piped up, his little voice trembling. "It's true, Grandma. Some days my mom is so nice. Other days, she's mean. I don't like the mean mom." His words stabbed me and I fought back tears. The room grew suffocatingly heavy. Then Rachel stepped in through the back door, her gaze sharp. I saw Samantha with a man named William Turner. They called each other honey. She was the one who hired Ivy to take her place and lie to this family. Michael turned to his wife, his voice breaking. "Is that true, Samantha? Tell me." For a long moment she stayed silent. Then suddenly she exploded. "Yes. It's true. I have a lover. I'm sick of this poor life. I'm sick of being a daughter-in-law in this house. William gives me a life 100 times better. And you, Michael, you're useless." Her words detonated like a bomb. Michael froze, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles went white. Ethan broke down sobbing, running into my arms. "Grandma, what did Mom say?" he cried. Tears blurred my eyes as I held him close. I looked at Samantha, her cold eyes, her lack of remorse. Michael rose, his voice shaking. "Do you really mean that?" But she didn't answer. She just turned and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. Silence suffocated the room. Ivy, who had stood quietly until now, finally spoke. Her voice was soft but clear. "Sister, you didn't have to hurt them like this. I only wanted to help, but I never imagined you'd go this far." Samantha shot her a glare but didn't speak. She simply walked out into the night. And with that slam of the door, everything changed. The laughter, the warmth, the safety of our home. It all vanished. I had lived my whole life for my family, but now I felt like a woman standing in the ruins after a hurricane, staring at what was left of the house I had poured my heart into. Samantha was gone. Michael's eyes were hollow. Ethan's innocent tears soaked my blouse. And I knew, with an ache that reached to my bones, nothing would ever be the same again. A week later, Michael and Samantha went to the courthouse to finalize the divorce. I didn't go, but when Michael came home he told me everything, his voice dry as if his soul had been scraped away. "Mom, she didn't even look at me or Ethan. She just signed the papers and walked out with that man like we had never existed." I sat beside him, held his hand and tried not to cry. Samantha hadn't even asked for custody, as though Ethan was just part of a role she got tired of playing. My heart ached, not only for Michael but for my little grandson, a 7-year-old who didn't deserve to be abandoned. "Don't worry, honey," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'll always be here. Ethan will never be without love." But deep down I knew this wound would take years to heal. Michael fell apart. He grew quiet, speaking less and less. He buried himself in work or just sat watching Ethan play in the yard. In his eyes, I saw the same sadness I once saw in Charles's eyes, back in those final days when he knew he couldn't stay with us anymore. I wanted to tell Michael everything would be okay, but I didn't know where to start. Then Ivy appeared, quiet, steady, like a small light in the darkness. She came to the house every day, bringing food in warm containers, sitting with Ethan, wiping his tears when he asked, "Auntie, where did my mom really go?" I'd watch Ivy, her face identical to Samantha's, but her heart completely different. She was patient, kind, and always found a way to make Ethan laugh. One afternoon I saw Ethan run into her arms, his little voice bubbling with joy. "Mom, Ivy, teach me how to draw a bird." My breath caught my chest tight. He was calling her mom with a carefree smile I hadn't seen in so long. Ivy laughed, stroked his hair and said, "Of course, my love. But you've got to make it a beautiful bird for me." I stood there with tears rolling down my cheeks. My grandson's innocent words soothed wounds nothing else could. Ivy hadn't just replaced Samantha in moments of deception. She was slowly becoming part of our family with her own sincerity. One night while I was cleaning the kitchen, Michael called me into the living room. He stood there holding a small ring, his hands trembling. Ivy stood beside him, her cheeks flushed, her eyes shining. Michael knelt, his voice breaking. "Ivy, I don't want to waste any more time. You've brought light back into my life and into Ethan's. Will you marry me and be his mom?" Ivy burst into tears, glancing at me for approval. I stepped forward, took her hand and whispered, "You deserve it, honey. You've already been part of this family." She hugged me, her tears soaking my shoulder. And in that moment I knew my family had finally begun to heal. The wedding came soon after, small but overflowing with love. In the yard, red roses were tied to the fence. Ethan, in his tiny suit, proudly stood as his dad's best man. Daniel flew in from a work trip, his smile as radiant as the day he first put on his pilot's uniform. I sat in the front row, tears streaming down my face. They weren't tears of loss anymore. They were tears of gratitude. I watched Ivy, radiant in her simple dress, holding Michael's hand, and I knew we had found a heart we could trust. After losing a fraud, life slowly returned to normal. Ivy embraced her new role, caring for Michael and Ethan with a love so genuine it filled the house. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments.